It all begins with Haruto, a boy leaving his city, as his childhood friend Miharu Ayase tearfully pleads him to stay. To comfort her, Haruto promises to return and marry her, vowing to protect her even in death. Heartbroken, Miharu agrees, and Haruto boards a bus that tragically crashes, claiming his life. Fast forward to the kingdom of Beltrum in 991, where Ryo Karasuki awakens in an unfamiliar room, haunted by fragmented memories of his past life as Haruto Amakawa. As men enter, discussing their business over food, Ryo's growling stomach leads to a rude remark about his hygiene. He escapes to pick fruit and recalls the murder of his mother, who had promised to take him to Yagumo. While grappling with grief, Ryo encounters Celia and her friends, who are searching for a girl with purple hair. Despite his warnings about the dangers of the slums, Celia casts a spell that reveals immense magic power emanating from Ryo, surprising everyone. After receiving a token for his information, the women leave, but Ryo is soon attacked by a masked man. Just as the man strikes, an angelic figure calls him Haruto and offers to teach him magic. Ryo taps into this power, dodges the attack, and fights back, revealing his assailant as his boss. In the chaos, he finds the missing girl, Princess Flora, who pleads for him to take her to the castle for a reward. As they make their way, Lady Christina accuses Ryo of kidnapping Flora, leading to a tense confrontation with Vanessa, who demands they hear his side. Though initially reluctant, Ryo agrees to go to the castle, knowing he can't resist. Meanwhile, royal guards find the severely injured masked man, who is swiftly silenced by an unknown figure in the crowd. At the castle, Ryo faces brutal interrogation from Charles Arbor, the vice-captain of the royal guard, who demands a confession about the supposed kidnapping. Despite the beatings, Ryo maintains his innocence. Meanwhile, Princess Flora, concerned for him, insists he be summoned, but protocol requires the king's consent. When Vanessa and Celia arrive during the interrogation, they are horrified by Ryo's treatment. But upon learning Flora is alive, he orders Ryo released, prioritizing her safety. Celia rushes to help Ryo, who collapses from exhaustion. Feeling guilty, she offers to heal him, and Charles permits them to leave. Later, Ryo awakens in the royal palace, surprised to find himself uninjured thanks to Celia's healing. She introduces herself formally as a magic student from the Beltrum Royal Academy. Curious about his future, Ryo asks about his meeting with the king. Celia assures him the king wishes to personally thank him, and Ryo, concerned about etiquette, asks her for guidance. They shake hands, sealing their partnership as Ryo is welcomed into the palace. When Ryo arrives at the academy, Celia discovers he can't read or write. She promises to help him, making him genuinely happy. As they walk to class, Celia warns him that most students come from wealthy families and might bully him. Ryo calmly acknowledges his situation. Once in class, the other students whisper disdainfully upon learning Ryo hails from the slums, despite his admission being a reward for saving Princess Flora. Struggling to connect with anyone, Ryo's literacy challenges compound his isolation. After class, he visits Celia's room for help. Initially annoyed, she softens upon recognizing him and invites him in. The vast collection of scrolls and textbooks awes Ryo. Celia, despite being only 12, is already a professor due to her brilliance. Ryo's memories of Haruto Amakawa from his past life in Japan help him master math quickly, impressing Celia. Over tea, he shares that his first day went well despite the discrimination. In martial arts class, the instructor recognizes Ryo's potential, challenging him to a duel. Even as classmates mock him, Ryo's kendo flashbacks enable him to impress the teacher. Though invited to join the Royal Knights, he declines, surprising everyone. 5 years later, Ryo prepares for a tournament alongside Alphonse and Stuart. Alphonse protests Ryo's inclusion as a commoner, but the teacher silences him. Celia expresses her excitement for Ryo, suggesting a scout may recruit him into the Royal Knights if he performs well. Yet Ryo has no plans to join. When asked about his future, Ryo reveals his intent to travel to Yagumo, his mother's homeland. Concerned about his plans, Celia invites him to stay and work in her lab, but he declines, noting that her noble status may lead to a marriage arrangement that wouldn't suit a commoner like him. At the Royal Exhibition Tournament, Ryo's first opponent is Charles Arbor, who had brutally beaten him years ago. Charles is shocked to see Ryo competing now, and Ryo calmly reminds him that he owes Charles for treating him so well. During the match, Charles's anger propels him, but Ryo exploits his weaknesses, disarming him and claiming victory. Afterward, Charles vents his frustration over drinks, mentioning that Ryo was once suspected of taking Princess Flora hostage, capturing the attention of Rice, an official. The next day, Celia plans to celebrate Ryo's victory, but catches him behind the school, where a girl confesses her love to him, leaving her feeling slightly sad. Celia doubts Ryo's prospects after graduation. Soon, the Imperial Academy hosts a lecture on controlling magic, specifically lightning spells. Alphonse taunts Ryo, claiming the lesson is beyond their class, leaving Ryo uneasy since he can't use magic. Alphonse sneers that only Rio could benefit from the lecture. In response, Celia asks Alphonse and Stuart to explain and demonstrate the lightning spell, but their lackluster efforts fall flat. Determined to show them true magic control, Celia shuts the blinds and unleashes a dazzling display of lightning spells that dance around the room. While Rio can't use magic formulas like his peers, his vast mana reserve allows him to mimic spells just by watching. After the demonstration, Stuart praises Celia, but complains about Rio attracting half the female students. Celia intervenes, telling Stuart to leave Rio alone. Later, the class has an outdoor exam, with Alphonse leading the group through the forest. He has a sneaky plan, much to Roanna's disapproval. She eventually concedes, allowing Alphonse to proceed. Stuart tasks Rio with carrying their bags, but Flora insists on helping, even when Rio declines. As they traverse the forest, goblins start to trail them. Alphonse shows surprising wisdom as he leads the group, uniting them against the goblins. In the midst of this, Rio senses a lurking presence. Race is testing his abilities. Following Alphonse's map, the group reaches a perilous cliff. Just as Alphonse is about to respond to Christina's query, they are ambushed by orcs. In the chaos, Stuart gets injured, causing Flora to tumble over the edge. Without hesitation, Rio dives after her, saving her, but falling himself. Alphonse manages to regroup and fend off the orcs. Uninjured, Rio finds himself alone in the forest, where Stuart shifts blame for Flora's fall onto him. Alphonse, suspicious, presses for answers. Frustrated with academy politics, Rio decides to leave sooner than planned. Flora, however, fights against the group to find him. Suddenly, a deafening roar shakes the forest. A minotaur approaches. Christina's Thunderball spell fails, prompting Alphonse to switch tactics to Ice Lance. Despite his efforts, the Minotaur's power overwhelms them. Flora, still nearby, attracts the creature's attention. Just as it lunges at her, Rio intervenes, severing the beast's hand and instructing Flora to flee while he confronts it. Using his spirit arts, he strikes the Minotaur's weak point, decapitating it with ease. As Rio disappears into the woods, students arrive too late. Rice, having witnessed everything, speculates Rio's dark hair and eyes may connect him to Yagumo. Meanwhile, Celia overhears a conversation between the headmaster and Duke Gustave about Rio's disappearance, revealing that he is being framed. Relieved that Rio is alive, Celia meets him one last time. He thanks her for her unwavering support at the academy, promising to write under the alias Haruto before they share an emotional hug. Torn between joy and sadness, Celia watches as Rio sets off for Yagumo. After a hasty departure from the kingdom, Rio arrives in Amande, a bustling market town in the kingdom of Galark. With no wanted posters to hinder him, he roams freely, gathering supplies but feeling an unsettling sense of being watched. Trying to shake it off, he stumbles upon a street vendor serving a pasta dish introduced by Lady Liselot, the town leader. Savoring the familiar flavors, he wonders if she shares a connection with Haruto. Seeking guidance, Rio heads to the Rika Merchant Guild, where Lottie, a sharp-eyed receptionist, assists him in selecting canned goods, and is intrigued by his extensive knowledge of tea. After a brief chat, he reflects on his journey. Before leaving Amande, he pens a farewell letter to Celia, hinting at his uncertain future and the dangers ahead. While trekking through the forest, Rio discovers an injured figure on the road. His attempt to help is met with a vicious attack from Latifa, who throws poisoned needles his way. In a shocking turn, she draws a knife with deadly intent. Despite a spell that heightens his strength, Rio must rely on his fists to subdue her. As Latifa cackles, Rio casts a weak sleep spell and notices her slave collar. Removing it, he learns her true identity, Endo Sumire, a girl from the bus accident that claimed their lives. She reveals her torment under the control of Stuart, who enforced her obedience with painful consequences. Rio, while cautious, permits her to leave, warning her of the dangers she faces in a world that preys on vulnerable souls. To his surprise, she insists on following him, hoping for companionship rather than servitude. Reluctantly, Rio accepts her company. As they journey east, Latifa's gratitude and longing for food bring her to tears at mealtime. She reveals her familiarity with spaghetti, reinforcing Rio's suspicion that they share a reborn existence. He hears her cries in the night, longing for Tokyo, a sign of her lingering past. In the morning, she notices that Rio resembles the boy she saw on the bus, sparking a sense of connection. When she asks if she can call him older brother, he agrees, hoping it comforts her. Rio spots a mysterious tree that Latifa seems oblivious to, hinting at some magical concealment. As they camp in the woods, Latifa begins to shed her nightmares with Rio's support. In the midst of this healing, he senses a wolf lurking nearby, a sign that their journey is far from over. Rio's world goes dark when a wolf unleashes a blinding white light, revealing 4 half-human figures: Urzua the Harpy, Sarah the Wolf Woman, Alma the Dwarf, and Orphea the High Elf. He tries to calm their fears, teaching them not to be afraid of humans. As he speaks, Orphea and Alma discover Latifa asleep in his tent, spellbound. Misunderstanding ensues, and Uzuma attacks, thinking Rio has kidnapped one of their own. Despite his protests, Uzuma uses spirit arts to overpower him, leaving him unconscious. When Rio awakens, he's chained in a mysterious dimension, where a woman teaches him about his magical potential. Just as he starts to grasp his new reality, he finds himself restrained again. Latifa bursts in, worried about him, while an elderly woman named Ursula enters to apologize, urging everyone, including Uzuma, to kneel in sorrow. She promises punishment for their actions and informs Rio that the elders will formally apologize the next day. The following morning, Ursula takes Rio to the Hall of the Elders, sharing tales of the World Tree and its spirit, Dryas. There, he meets more elders, Sildora the elf and Dominic the dwarf, who express gratitude for saving one of their own. In return, they offer to grant him a wish. Rio asks for Latifa to stay with him, which they readily agree to. He then requests permission to remain in the village longer to learn spiritual arts and other skills. Meanwhile, Dryas senses a spirit within Rio, a rarity since most spirits were killed in a divine war. This revelation elevates his status in the village, granting him VIP privileges. As he settles into his new home, he learns that the village's food resembles rice, and is pleasantly surprised to find Orphea and the other girls moving in with him to help Latifa connect with others. Days fly by as Rio enjoys life with his new friends, absorbing knowledge and participating in local traditions. Meanwhile, Rice and a companion embark on a risky quest to retrieve a mysterious egg hidden deep in a cave, believing it will strengthen their brigade. However, as they make their way back to the Strahl region, they're pursued by a sleek black creature, their escape turning into a dangerous chase. 1 year later, Rio and Latifa have officially made their home in the village, welcomed by Sildora and the others as sworn friends. To seal their bond, Lady Dryas kisses them both, marking their new status. Dominic announces that the feast will kick off right after the ceremony, and as it begins, the girls, Orphea, Latifa, and Sarah, fawn over Rio, their spirits high with drink. Surrounded by the trio, Rio feels both honored and overwhelmed as they exchange cups of friendship. Seizing a moment of quiet, Rio confides in Ursula about his plans to leave the village, worried it might disrupt the friendships he's forged. Ursula insists it's too soon. Meanwhile, in another part of the world, Reese offers a red pill to a friend, promising it will shield him from danger and help track his location as they set out to retrieve a mysterious egg. As Reese soars through the sky, he spots black wyverns in the distance. Back on the ground, Rio strolls with Latifa, who expresses how important he is to her and their group. However, when Rio reveals his intention to leave for Yagumo, Latifa's fury boils over. She insists on accompanying him despite his warnings of danger. The village elders gather to discuss the black wyvern reports, just as Reese sneaks into their den to steal eggs. The girls, spotting a guy camping by a tranquil water, grow concerned when they notice a wyvern egg strapped to him. When he attempts to escape on his griffin, Sarah orders an attack. Amid the chaos, she learns of the new threat posed by the egg. Latifa, distraught over Rio's potential departure, discovers a lifeless body and a shattered egg, followed by the appearance of a grieving dark wyvern. Back in the village, Dominic rallies everyone to evacuate, informing Rio about the wyvern attack as he races into the forest, guided by Latifa's voice through an amulet. Alma heroically intervenes to save Latifa from a wyvern, but she struggles to deal real damage. Just when it seems all hope is lost, Rio arrives, rescuing Latifa and unleashing his raw power on the wyvern. He strikes the beast down with a decisive energy bolt, prompting the other wyverns to retreat in fear. Alma watches in disbelief. The following morning, she apologizes for her earlier behavior, admitting her dependence on him. When Rio reveals his plan to go to Yagumo, Latifa shares her secret. She died long ago in Japan. In turn, Rio opens up about his own reincarnation, assuring her that he's still the same person. As their bond deepens, Latifa promises to wait for his return. As Rio prepares to leave, the elders present him with gifts, a mithril sword, wyvern skin armor, and essential supplies for his journey. He vows to return should the village ever face trouble, sharing heartfelt goodbyes with everyone, especially Latifa. After 2 weeks of searching, Rio finally arrives in the Yagumo region, a place that resembles Japan, but he still hasn't uncovered any clues about his parents. At the village field, he meets young girls Ruri and Sayo, who lead him to their grandmother, Yuba, the village leader. Intrigued by Rio's story, Yuba agrees to hear him out. He reveals his parents, Zen and Ayame, but Yuba's demeanor shifts when he mentions their names. She sends Ruri and Sayo away, wanting to speak privately. Alone, Rio shares his journey and expresses a wish to honor his parents by making graves for them. Yuba listens intently before revealing a shocking truth. She is Zen's mother, making her Rio's grandmother. Stunned, Rio learns that Yuba and the family created graves for Zen and Ayame when they left. Though she doesn't explain why they left, she offers Rio a place to stay with her and Ruri, keeping his lineage a secret for now. The next morning, Rio wakes early, ready to help out. Ruri, still half asleep and flustered by his presence, retreats to her room. Later, he impresses everyone with his cooking, using his spiritual powers to heat water for miso soup. Shin, Sayo's older brother, initially wary of Rio, warms up after tasting his food. After breakfast, Yuba sends Shin to take Rio to meet Daula, the village's huntmaster. Despite Shin's doubts about Rio's abilities, they head out. During the hunt, Rio's archery skills shine, leaving Shin frustrated by his own struggles. After the hunt, feeling dirty, Rio decides to build a bath for himself, surprising Ruri and Sayo when they discover it. Ruri playfully teases Sayo about liking Rio, making her blush. News of Rio building the bath reaches Shin and his friends, who mock him until Ruri and Sayo defend him. As Rio helps with chores, he earns admiration from the village girls. Yuba later enlists his help to oversee a shipment of rice to the capital. Suddenly, a fight breaks out between Shin and Gon, the chief's son from a nearby village, who shows up uninvited. Gon, whose cart broke down, hints at staying with Ruri and even suggests marriage. Shin, angered by Gon's rudeness toward his sister, tries to defend her honor but gets easily overpowered. Yuba intervenes, allowing Gon to stay, but forbidding him from leaving the property. Gon spots Rio on his way out and attempts to kick him, but trips and falls. Later that night, Rio gifts Sayo a protective amulet, while Gon and his men plot something sinister. The next morning, after a visit from Hayate, the region's tax collector, Rio practices martial arts. When Ruri and Sayo ask why he learned martial arts, he reveals it was to protect a girl he loved. That night, Gon sneaks into Yuba's house to assault Ruri. Sensing the danger, Rio rushes to protect her. Thanks to the amulet, Ruri is unharmed, and Rio quickly subdues Gon, pinning him down. After a fierce struggle, he knocks Gon out just as Hayate and the village guard arrive to arrest him. In the aftermath, Rio reflects on his violent reaction, worrying about merging with his past self. The next morning, Hayate informs them that Gon will face consequences for his actions. Rio apologizes for losing control, but Ruri and Sayo thank him for keeping them safe. Hayate is gearing up to leave the village and decides to bring Gon along. Before they go, Yuba gives Hayate a letter for his father, Guki, the head of a powerful family in the capital. After finalizing their plans, Hayate, Gon, and a few villagers set off for Karasuki. As they approach the city, Daula, the village huntmaster, finds an inn for the men while asking Rio and Shin to take Gon to the police station. Watching Gon in chains, Shin mutters that Gon got off too easy. If it were up to him, Gon wouldn't be alive for attacking his sister, Sayo. Sensing the tension, Daula treats them to a meal, introducing Rio to kamutan, a traditional noodle dish. Rio loves it, and the others laugh at his delight. Later, Shin thanks Rio for saving Sayo, and the mood shifts to a moment of seriousness. The next day, Shin arranges for Sayo to shop with Rio, hoping to strengthen their bond. At the market, Sayo buys a pink flower hair ornament, catching the eye of a sly vendor who encourages her to win Rio's heart. As they stroll back, chaos erupts when Komomo, a young noblewoman, appears in danger. Rio leaps to save her just before her servant arrives, thanking him for the rescue. As soldiers arrive, Rio takes Sayo's hand. News of the rescue reaches Guki, sparking his interest, especially since no one knows the hero's identity. Hayate arrives with the letter, revealing Rio's true lineage as the son of Zen and Ayame, a noble couple. Guki recounts how Zen protected Ayame during a war, and how they fled from an ambassador's malicious demands. Convinced Rio is their grandson, Guki urges him to meet his grandparents, the king and queen. The next day, Rio meets King Himura and Queen Shizuku, sharing his tragic past, including how Lucius, a family friend, killed his mother. King Himura, moved by Rio's story, questions him about his intentions regarding Lucius. With vengeance burning in his heart, Rio vows to find and kill Lucius. King Himura warns of the danger, but offers his support, proposing a test, a fight against Guki. Confident, Rio agrees. The duel showcases Rio's raw fighting style, surprising Guki, who unleashes his wind slash. In retaliation, Rio unleashes a torrent of water magic, defeating Guki and earning the king's admiration. With his parents' legacy weighing on him, Rio returns to their graves for a moment of silence. After discovering the truth about his royal heritage, Rio decides to confide in his close friend, Ruri. At first, she's taken aback and starts talking to him like he's a noble, but he quickly stops her. "Just be your cheeky self," he insists, valuing their friendship over formality. He reveals his plans to return to his home country by next year, but with a special stop first. Ruri, though sad to see him go, assures him he's always welcome back to the village. When she and Yuba ask about anyone waiting for him, he mentions a girl who feels like an older sister. The next day, Ryo visits Sayo at the sewing shop, and his casual familiarity with her makes the other villagers jealous. The girls gossip lightheartedly, clearly seeing Sayo's affection for him. As Ryo enjoys his carefree days in the village, he considers it his third home, a refuge from royal pressures. While Ruri helps Dala plant rice, she jokingly claims she'd make a great wife, prompting a laugh from Ryo. But soon, he tells Sayo about his departure after the harvest festival. Sayo tries to mask her disappointment, but when she's alone, the tears flow. Her brother Shin walks in, and misinterpreting the scene, gets furious with Ryo. Sayo quickly clarifies her tears aren't from heartbreak, but sadness about his leaving. The tension eases, but the mood remains heavy. As Harvest Festival approaches, Sayo secretly trains in martial arts, driven by an unspoken resolve. At the festival, Guki humorously challenges the men to wrestle, while Ryo helps Ruri and Komomo prepare food. Later, Sayo pulls Ryo aside and confesses her love, but he can't reciprocate her feelings. Heartbroken, she requests to join him on his journey, assuring him she won't be a burden. Despite her determination, Ryo declines gently, realizing it would complicate things for both. Early the next morning, Ryo sets off, with Ruri and Yuba bidding farewell and reminding him he's always welcome back. As he reaches the village gate, Sayo waits to say goodbye, reflecting on Guki's earlier question about her love for Ryo and her eventual decision to leave the village for him. They exchange a sad farewell as Ryo walks away, while Shin waves in the distance. On his way back to the spirit village, Ryo is greeted warmly by his friend Latifa, who's excited about his travels and newfound family ties. The elders ask how long he'll stay, and he promises a few months before his next journey, hinting at bringing a house back with him. After a long travel period, Ryo finally feels at home again, finding peace he hadn't experienced in a while. One day, he's playfully invited to bathe with Latifa, causing laughter among the other girls. But the real scandal hits the next morning when he wakes up to find a mysterious girl in his bed. Initially thinking it's a dream, his shock deepens as Sarah and the other girls walk in, eyes wide in disbelief at the unexpected scene. Ryo knows explaining the situation to the other girls will be tricky, especially as they barge in, demanding answers. He feels just as lost. He has no idea who the girl is or how she ends up in his bed. Sarah immediately feels guilty, thinking she is to blame for walking in on such a scandalous scene. Just then, the girl wakes up, casually rubbing her eyes. "I'm a spirit who made a deal with Haruto." Suddenly, Ryo remembers her. He has met this spirit before and learned spirit arts from her, but she vanished without a trace. Their first meeting is strange, and now this reunion feels even more surreal. There is one major hitch: she doesn't have a name. The other girls are baffled when she calls him Haruto. Communicating telepathically, the spirit assures Ryo she'll keep his secret, but insists on having a real name. Sensing the need for help, Sarah suggests consulting the village elders. The spirit gracefully transforms her appearance, donning a stunning dress that leaves Ryo speechless. In that moment, he instinctively names her Aishia, meaning spring in an ancient tongue, perfectly reflecting how she makes him feel. They head to the village elders, where Dryas, the spiritual leader, senses a new spirit's arrival. Aishia's lack of memory puzzles everyone. Dryas, intrigued, asks what kind of spirit arts she specializes in. "Everything," Aishia replies confidently. To test her skills, the elders arrange a duel between Ryo and Aishia. Outside, Ryo throws a rock into the air to signal the duel's start. The moment it hits the ground, they clash. Ryo tries to close the distance, but Aishia effortlessly blocks his moves, perfectly mirroring his attacks. Realizing this is no ordinary fight, he unleashes his spiritual energy, surrounding himself with a dazzling aura. Not to be outdone, Aishia does the same. Their battle erupts into a spectacular display of ice shards, fireballs, and tornadoes, leaving the audience in awe. Just as things threaten to spiral out of control, Dryas intervenes, recognizing Aishia's incredible strength. Impressed, he offers to mentor her in the spirit world. The villagers welcome Aishia, eager to embrace her as one of their own. Weeks later, Dominic, a talented craftsman, unveils a unique house for Ryo, designed to fit inside his space-time cache. As preparations for his departure ramp up, Sarah urges him to spend time with Latifa, realizing he has neglected their bond. Determined to make amends, Ryo reflects on how little time they have had together lately. Meanwhile, Latifa sneaks into Ryo's bath, playfully insisting he wash her back. In their intimate moment, Ryo confides his real name is Haruto. Latifa reveals her true name too, deepening their sibling-like bond. "I'm sorry for not being a better brother," he promises. "I'll be back as soon as I can." The next morning, as Ryo Rio prepares to leave, Ursula gifts him a spirit teleportation crystal, a one-way ticket back if needed. Sarah presents a special earring that changes his hair color for blending in. Before he leaves, Rio reminds the villagers to look after Latifa. With Aisha by his side, he takes off toward the Strahl region, where his heart aches for Celia. Arriving in Beltran's capital city, he notices the streets are unusually busy. A nearby baker reveals the House of Arbor is preparing for a noble wedding, sending chills down Rio's spine as fear for Celia grips him. Later that night, he and Aisha sneak into the school where Celia works, but when they reach her lab, it is empty. Using his spiritual abilities, he compels a professor to reveal that Celia is at the royal palace, marrying Charles, Rio's old enemy. Rage and despair surge within him. Rio, taken aback, learns that the kingdom of Beltram suffered greatly in a recent conflict with the Proxia Empire, but the House of Duke Arbor managed to broker a fragile peace, resulting in the royal family's diminished power. Duke Huguenot's faction fled when held accountable, leaving Duke Arbor eager to ally with Count Celia for greater influence. Clearly, Celia is being used in this political game. Outside, Aisha suggests using her spirit form to locate Celia, but Rio cautions that she risks detection due to the mix of OD and mana. Undeterred, Aisha sets off. Meanwhile, Celia dines with Charles and her father, who apologizes for not being present sooner. Charles reassures them about the wedding, assuring tight security and support from the Mage Corps and Royal Guards. However, he inquires about Duke Huguenot, which Celia's father vehemently denies, interpreting Charles's comments as a veiled threat. Later, in her room, Celia reminisces about her past with Rio and his promise to return. As she contemplates burning his letter, Rio arrives, disguising his hair to avoid detection. They share a heartfelt reunion, but the atmosphere turns serious when Rio questions her marriage plans. Celia, defensive yet playful, admits to agreeing to the marriage, but is cautious about her true feelings, hinting at uncertainty about Charles. When she jokingly asks if Rio would take her away, he's taken aback. She gives him a countdown to leave, leading her to cry when he's gone, yet she feels joy that he kept his promise. Aisha senses Celia's turmoil and vows to help Rio uncover the truth behind her marriage. The next day, Rice, from a rival kingdom, arrives to congratulate Charles, but keeps his distance to avoid suspicion. As the ceremony approaches, Charles introduces Celia to his other 6 wives, placing her at the bottom of their hierarchy. Tenesina, the first wife, warns Celia to maintain decorum, a reminder of her precarious position. As Celia receives Princess Christina, they share a moment of warmth, with Christina lamenting how Celia's smile has faded. Despite the harsh realities of her impending marriage, Celia assures Christina that her decision is voluntary, yet the sadness lingers. Meanwhile, Charles relishes his power over the kingdom, confident that one day it will all be his. During the ceremony, as Celia arrives in a carriage, the crowd cheers for the silver bride. Just as she feels overwhelmed, Aisha telepathically nudges her to look to her right, revealing Rio in the crowd. Tears fill her eyes, but before they can connect, an alarm signals an intruder, shocking everyone when it turns out to be Rio. Celia flashes back to the moment Rio proposed to her. Now, feeling helpless, she sees Charles offer his hand just as Rio charges in, throwing soldiers aside like toys. The commander orders a defensive line, but Rio blasts them away with a powerful air spell. The mage squad fires thunder bullets, but Rio dodges effortlessly. Leaping over soldiers, he reaches Celia while they enhance their abilities to surround her and Charles. Charles tries to impress her with their elite status, but Rio takes them down like it's nothing. He delivers a gut-wrenching punch to Charles, leaving him gasping. Suddenly, Rio grabs Celia and puts a knife to her throat. Count Claire and Duke Arbor try to intervene, but Vanessa blocks them. Rio telepathically communicates with Celia, revealing his intent. He threatens Charles, but insists he doesn't want to kill anyone. He urges Celia to reconsider her marriage to Charles, knowing it'll crush her spirit. Celia, confused, asks what he plans to do if they escape. Rio promises to take her far away, where they can be free. Moved by his determination, Celia agrees. As Rio jumps with her, she tells Charles to save himself, but he orders his troops to capture them. Rio vaults over the soldiers, dodging attacks from the mage squad. Rice, watching, realizes how much stronger Rio has become. As Rio makes his escape with Celia, Alfred prepares to pursue him. On the rooftops, Celia marvels at Rio's speed, urging him to go faster. He prepares to become a decoy, handing her off to Aisha. As Rio leaps back into action, he fights off the ground troops, struggling to hold back his power. Just as things look bleak, Alfred confronts him, leading to an intense duel. In the castle, bad weather brews, and Celia waits anxiously for Rio. When he finally arrives, she's thrilled, tripping into him. They reflect on their separation, but their moment is interrupted by 5 portals opening around them. Aishia senses danger, urging Rio to save the kids. In the forest, 3 kids find themselves in trouble with bandits. Rio arrives just in time, taking down the attackers in a flash. He unlocks the cart, encountering Ayase Miharu, his childhood friend, who grabs his hand, desperate to escape.